Next, we're going to hear a personal story from April Rovero. She's the founder and executive director of the National Coalition Against Prescription Drug Abuse. Please welcome April Rovero.
Hello, I'm really pleased to be able to be with you today. I think I bring a little bit different perspective of the opioid crisis, and I do see it as a crisis. I've been in this space working for the last 8 years to do what I can to educate community members, that's our number one mission, about the dangers of prescription drugs, to drive down the demand curve for opioids in particular, because people understand that they can become addicted and they could potentially die from it. So my target groups, as you can see, there's really nobody that's not a possible target for me. Yesterday I traveled all the way from Connecticut, and guess what? The person sitting next to me had quite the, we had quite the conversation. So I have found that it's possible, even in an informal way, to communicate information that I think can stimulate maybe an interest in learning more, and to potentially save lives, and that's what the point of this is. We also do some policy change work, mostly at the county and the state levels, although I have worked on that at the federal level as well, and along with legislative advocacy. In addition to the organization I founded, and it is a 501c nonprofit organization, the National Coalition Against Prescription Drug Abuse, I also am affiliated with a number of other organizations or coalitions in particular, so you can see a good listing of them here. The ones that I want to call out probably the most would be the Contra Costa County Meds Coalition. That's a coalition that is in my county, Northern California, Contra Costa County. I founded and I chair that coalition. We've been in operation for about 6 years, probably 7. So the other one I want to call out is the Fed Up Coalition. I was actually in Washington, D.C. this past weekend, and the Fed Up Coalition works at a federal level to drive federal action. So we're after the FDA, we're after the president, wherever we can, influence financial, I shouldn't say financial, funding that would come down to our states, then down to the local level to make a difference, primarily in treatment, but also in prevention. So moving forward, why am I in this space? It is because of a personal tragedy in our family. This is my beautiful son, Joey Rovero, who was a college student about to graduate from Arizona State University, one day away from coming home for what would have been his last winter break, when we got the news that he had been found in his off-campus apartment where he lived with his 2 roommates, fellow fraternity brothers of his. 9 days before Joey's death, from what it ended up being, we found out an opioid overdose that was in combination with benzodiazepine, Xanax, and a little bit of alcohol. He'd been to a doctor just 9 days before that, and he had been prescribed medications that he should never have received. That doctor is now serving 30 years to life in prison, Dr. Lee Seng, who some of you may have some awareness of, for prescribing not just to Joey, and the prescribing led to his death, but 2 other young men, and then there were 5 other patients of hers that were part of the trial that happened about 6 years after Joey died that resulted in closure for our family in that regard. So Joey is gone, and I really feel that my work is really in his memory, of course, and Joey was a wonderful kid. There was absolutely no indication of trouble at all. We'd seen him just 3 weeks before when he came home for Thanksgiving break, and what we heard from him was that his 2 roommates had a big pill problem. They weren't paying the rent, they weren't paying for any other expenses, and he was really kind of like, what do? I don't know what I should do here. I've talked to them, they won't come to the table with the money. They need to pay for their share of this apartment. His solution was to go to this doctor when he just happened to run into a couple of guys that were headed there who were seeing the doctor every 30 days for a prescription. It was his easy out. Go back to the university, where I later, of course, learned pill abuse and use was rampant. Joey was the first of 9 students in the course of the year. He was the first of 9 students that either died there at that university of an overdose or a suicide, and one of those suicides was one of his roommates. So I'm going to play a quick video for you. This is something that high school students in our area put together for us, and it really, I think, reflects what we're dealing with here. This is our family's life. This is Joey's life.
Hello, I'm April Rovero. I would like to introduce you to my son, Joseph John Rovero III, fondly known as Joey. Joey was born on March 9th, 1988, into a family that simply couldn't wait for him to arrive. Despite the 14-year age difference between Joey and his older brother, the two grew very close during the years, and his dad and I simply adored him from the moment he was born. Joey loved sports right from the start, and he was highly competitive. While soccer was his primary sport through 7th grade, football became his passion, and he was a starter throughout his high school football career. Our family loves the outdoors, and Joey's dad and I have great memories of the vacations we took with Joey in Alaska, the Canadian Rockies, and various other national parks. Joey was a good student, and I would say his favorite subjects were history and English. He was extremely creative, and we were constantly amazed by the creative art, video, and writing projects he shared with us. Joey was an extremely popular young man. He had such an engaging personality, and he lit up every room he entered. Joey loved to laugh, and he was known for his jokes, daring spirit, and huge hugs. He was also non-judgmental and caring, and many considered him their best friend. Joey began attending Arizona State University the fall after high school graduation. He had no problem adapting to college life. He joined a fraternity and had tons of new friends by the end of his first semester. Joey was looking forward to graduation and starting a new career in just 5 months when tragedy struck. On December 18, 2009, Joey died from an accidental overdose of prescribed medications he had mixed with alcohol during a college party. Instead of returning home for Christmas, Joey arrived from Arizona in a casket. We buried him the day after Christmas, with hundreds of his family and friends mourning his loss. The death of our beautiful son has completely shattered the lives of everyone who knew him. Knowing Joey's death was completely avoidable has made it that much harder for us to deal with.
This is the doctor who I mentioned earlier has a lot of time that she'll be spending in prison because of her actions. The young man here in the middle is the other young man that is gone from this world, John, and second worst day of my life when we learned that he was no longer with us. This problem is so personal. For every single individual like Joey that passes away, I see the impact, the circle of impact around them. And Dr. Willis, I think it was you that said we've lost 72,000 people in 2017. Take that number and multiply it times even 100 people, friends, family, neighbors, whomever, teachers. The impact is enormous. People are dying every single day, and we've got to do something. We have a major issue, as everyone stated. I won't go through these numbers because you've seen most of it already, but California deaths, we've had a significant number of people lost here, as you can see. But I go to this slide, and I think this is a really important one. These two young men right here are brothers. These two young men here are brothers. I now know families that have lost 3 children to an overdose death. Every single one of these overdoses was avoidable. It didn't have to happen. I know every single one of these, I have 650 photos, and that's just a small fraction of how many we've lost in this world. There are no boundaries, literally. I often talk to parents, and they'll say, oh, my kid gets good grades, we're good, he's involved or she's involved in sports. Well, guess what? They get hurt, they get injured, they go to the doctor, they get prescribed opioids often. They have teeth extracted, they get prescribed opioids. There is really no one that's safe from this if you even take medication legitimately. You never know whether you're going to be the next one that's dealing with an issue here. This is really true. I talk to people all the time. They just don't see that pills are a problem. Doctor prescribes them. Why would they prescribe them if they were dangerous? There's a very low perception of harm for a lot of people out there, and that's what I work to break down. The reality is just this: they're just as potentially deadly, addictive, and illegal. We have kids that are passing around pills on school campuses or just outside of campuses. I don't think they really get it, that there could be some serious legal consequences. They aren't being informed of that. Our community impact is enormous. I think I've suffered the worst thing possible in losing my child until I talk to a family that's dealing with addiction. I know parents that have had to throw their kids out on the street, almost literally, because they can't handle any more the friction and the problems that are happening as a result of their addiction. I know one dad that almost got stabbed by his son who was high on Oxycontin, who would never think to do that. People act differently when they're under the influence. A lot of trauma, and I think that a lot of the parents are dealing with long-term anxiety issues themselves, and then I see that they're moving over to self-medicate themselves out of their problems, dealing with their depression or their anxiety because they just don't have the tools and the skills to cope with the addiction in their family. I have kids that have come up to me and say, they've told me it's not them that has the problem, it's their parents, mom, dad. I presented in West Virginia in one of the highest hit areas of the country at a high school, and I had a young man come up to me to tell me that he was one of 14 kids in a family. Their dad died of an overdose, and he got himself into trouble with some substance misuse also and got into legal trouble. His mother wouldn't let him come home. She already had enough on her plate. She couldn't handle him anymore. So anyway, it's huge. We have to do something, and thankfully we are starting to see some federal and state and local action too. CDC guidelines are out there now. They're not mandatory, but they're good guidelines. I'd love to see all doctors adhere to them. Federal funding is starting to trickle down, but I will tell you it's not enough. So the Fed Up Coalition that I mentioned earlier, that's one of the things we're doing, is hammering for more money. We need it. But we also need that money to come down to the local level and be spent wisely. We heard also about these treatment facilities, and how do you know what the good ones are and the bad ones are? There really isn't enough, I don't think in terms of evidence-based, I don't think we really have that nailed down yet. And we have some of these facilities that are just plain money grubbers, and they are not really there for good. We have public awareness campaigns, and that's what we're building solidly, I think, in my coalition, as well as others that are involved with the California Opioid Safety Network. The data gathering tools are out there, but they need to be better. One of the things that really bothers me a lot, and I had a chance to talk to Letitia about this morning, is that we really don't know what's happening on our college campuses. That data, that you die in Arizona, as my son did, that data stays in Arizona. It does not come back to the local area where the impact actually is. So we need to find a way to collect the data and not have it be damaging or threatening, I guess, to the university setting. And we do see some concern about that. Mandatory use of in our state, the prescription drug monitoring program named CURES. That is finally mandatory to use by physicians who are going to be prescribing in certain settings, which I think is a really good thing. And we have just passed a safe medication storage and disposal program, which is really good because we need people to lock up their meds. You never know who in your home is coming in to take advantage of those medications that are up in your cabinets or maybe in the kitchen counter or whatever. And we also, again, as you've heard about, have this California Opioid Safety Network. So I'm really proud of our state for really going to the extent that we have to get this done. But and each one of our coalitions throughout the state are really working hard to make a difference within our own worlds, and we're communicating with each other, which I think is really important, to share best practices and tools that we're developing. So how you can make a difference is build us something that works, that helps us. Your work here is extremely important, and I really encourage you all to dig in think about the faces that you saw up here. Think about Joey and all the others that are being impacted. You can absolutely make a difference. And we'll look forward to seeing the results of your work. I'm hoping I can personally use it to make a difference. Thank you.